What's up, guys? So I just came across this video from Joe Rogan and David Mamet? I don't know. I'm sure this guy's important, but this is my first time hearing about him. But anyway, I came across this video and they were discussing the Bible. So what I want to do is we're going to go through this video. I'm going to play it and then we're going to break down things that they're saying. All right, let's get into it.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Yes, I mean, it also goes back to the Enlightenment, to the idea that God doesn't exist, and the idea that the human being is the measure of all things. Well, if the human being is the measure of all things, what does that mean? Our reason. And our reason is completely flawed. All of us do things every day which are unreasonable, sinful, wrong, and absurd.
I agree, myself included.
Right? And the reasonable person says, wait a second, why did I do that? What do I have to refer to in my confusion and my self-loathing? Well, the Bible was a pretty good bet, you know.
Amen.
For the Hebrew Bible for 6,000 years, right? The Christian Bible for 2,000 is a pretty good bet. Say, wait a second, let's talk about human nature. You really aren't that smart. You really aren't in charge of the world. You really aren't. Although you think you are, you think that because you're human. But God's in charge of the world, and there's a certain way things are. And if you'd like to get out of your wretched self-consciousness and self-delusion, you better get your ass into church.
This guy's on a roll.
But don't you think that, you know, when atheists talk about religion and they criticize organized religion and criticize the Bible, they talk about things that are in the Bible that seem preposterous, right? They talk about people rising from the dead and walking on water, particularly the Old Testament, right?
Well, that sounds more like the New Testament to me, especially the walking on water part. And I'm sure the rising from the dead thing, he's referring to Jesus, which is the New Testament. So I'm really happy that Joe has seemingly been put in a position to talk about the Bible a lot more lately. I don't know why it keeps happening, but he keeps having guests on his show that want to talk about the Bible. Now, although I believe Joe is a very, very, very smart dude, it shows me that he lacks certain knowledge about the Bible when he mentions rising from the dead and walking on water in reference to the Old Testament. And I know there were people who were risen from the dead in the Old Testament. And maybe he didn't just mean to say it all in like the same sentence, but that's what I gathered from it. And also hearing him speak in previous podcasts, it shows me that he may know a little bit about the Bible, but he really hasn't dug into it from a non-biased, objective point of view. And he's not alone in this. Many people who criticize the Bible couldn't tell you the difference between the Old Testament and New Testament.
Like, to use that as a guidebook for life, you have to kind of ignore some of the stuff that doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense to who?
Well,
don't you think?
The Bible's a myth. Okay, the Bible, right, especially the Christian Bible comes out of the Jewish Bible. It's a retelling of the story in a different way. But the Jewish Bible is a myth, and the myth is...
Saying the Bible is a myth is a little weird because the Bible is 66 different books. So it's not just all one book. It's a library of books. So which part of the Bible is the myth part? That's a really big stretch, essentially saying the whole entire thing is just a myth. But it's pretty much agreed upon by most scholars that the Bible is a historical book with historical figures, historical places, and there are numerous archaeological discoveries to back this up. And there's more happening all the time. Now, maybe he's talking about like the Noah's Ark, the Adam and Eve story. You know, I don't know. Maybe he's specifically talking about those, or parting of the Red Sea. You know, these are things that do seem very extravagant, but I believe that all things are plausible if the universe can pop into existence out of nothing. But anyway.
The myth of creation and the myth of human experience. So what it does is, chapter by chapter, story by story, it challenges us with disturbing and bizarre images. And it says, well, why don't you try to understand this? See if you can understand this. What does it really mean to escape from Egypt? Does it mean escaping from your inner Pharaoh? What does it really mean to part the Red Sea?
He seems to have a pretty new age interpretation of the Bible, where everything is all like allegorical and the whole thing is a parable and it didn't really happen. It's just stories to make you think about your own personal life, which I would definitely disagree with.
So these stories are told, any myth is a dramatic retelling of an underlying reality that can't be expressed rationally.
I don't think so. There's a lot of myths that are just myths to be myths. I mean, it's a whole like Marvel Cinematic Universe for.
Right? So the atheists say everything can be expressed rationally. For example, you know that the earth is burning up. You can tell that because sometimes things get warmer and sometimes things get colder. You can also tell that when things get colder, that's obviously because the earth is burning up, because the sun is melting the glaciers and the glaciers are raising the temperature. You can also tell, of course, that to be fair to everyone, children change sex. You know that, don't you? And you can tell that men can compete as women and women compete as men. This is all human confusion because we trust our senses and we trust our mind, and the mind just, it doesn't work real good.
Now, don't get it twisted. I'm a very rational, logical person, and I believe in reason and logic and rationality. But what he's saying is actually very profound about how, you know, if we're just trusting our mind and our reason, and now here we are saying men can compete as women and all these other things that are going on in the world that just, like, they really don't make any rational sense. But everyone is trying to push this as a rational thing. I think that does a good job at letting you know the human condition.
We're very cunning, but we aren't very smart, human beings. And that's the message of the Bible.
I mean, I don't think that's the whole message of the Bible.
Moses the Egyptians tried to kill him all of his life. The Egyptians tried to kill him. He didn't have any trouble with the Egyptians because God was on his side. He had trouble with the Jews because the Jews were always saying, who the hell do you think you are?
That's actually pretty funny. He had no trouble with the Pharaoh in Egypt because God was on his side. But when he was trying to lead God's people, that's when all his troubles came. And that is facts.
That all the Old Testament is the story of atheists, really, saying, who the hell do you think you are?
It's not really a story of atheists. It's actually a story of polytheists who were kind of resistant to falling in line with only worshiping one God. And that's a constant battle throughout the whole entire Old Testament, is them struggling with their desire to worship other gods instead of the one true God.
So when you're talking about the Bible, right? And the lessons in the Bible, isn't part of the problem is that people translated it from ancient Hebrew to Latin to Greek and all these other languages, and then eventually to English. Like, a lot's lost along the way, right? And a lot is open to interpretation. Like, a lot of what we're talking about in these myths and stories that people take as factual occurrences, they probably were some sort of there's some sort of a lesson in the myth, some sort of allegory. There's things about these stories that probably have hints of truth. But isn't it hard to kind of decipher it all if you can't speak the mother language?
So this is something that a lot of skeptics say. They say that, things got lost in translation. The only issue with that is that we have very, 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 very early manuscripts. And in having those early manuscripts, we can translate them directly from those early manuscripts. So it doesn't have to go from Hebrew to Greek to Latin to this to that, all the way to English. No, it can go directly from Hebrew to English. It can go from Greek to English. What's really interesting is when we found the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran and we found manuscripts of the Old Testament, they were like 99% exactly the same as the Old Testament that we've been reading for thousands of years. So there's really nothing that's lost in translation. It says what it says.
That's a very good question. So I want to, first let me ask you, okay, I'm going to tell you a story, okay?
Okay.
These two octopuses walk into a laundromat.
Okay.
See, that's what a myth is. I said two octopuses walk into a laundromat.
I actually pictured it.
And you didn't say, wait a second, octopuses can't walk and they wouldn't be in a laundromat.
Well, I thought about it, but I'm being polite.
So what you said is, yeah, tell me more. Okay.
I'm hoping there's a good joke.
Okay, well, I'll get to that. But it's the same thing with the Bible is really two octopuses walk into a laundromat. So I'm going to tell you a story. I want you to suspend your disbelief because there's something in this story you might get a kick out of. Mm-hmm. There might be some wisdom in it. There might yes and might no. But if you listen as you would to a story, which the Bible is, it's a myth, rather than to a factual retelling, you might get a kick out of it.
Again, it's not really debatable that the Bible was written to be interpreted as literal in places that it's supposed to be literal, as allegorical in places that it's supposed to be allegorical, as historical in the places that it's supposed to be historical. It's 66 different books. to say that it was just written as a myth, you're painting with way too broad of a brush.
As far as a translation goes, I can read the Bible in Hebrew. Started learning when I was 40. It's easy language. And there are a lot of mistranslations.
What I would ask you is, how do you know that there's mistranslations? And are you the only person who speaks Hebrew that recognizes mistranslations? And if it's such an easy language to learn, then why haven't the mistranslations been corrected? The answer to that is it's not mistranslated.
But the main point is not the mistranslations, because there are some pretty good English translations too. But the main point is saying that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense.
So what do you think the Bible is? Do you think the Bible is a bunch of very wise people got together and they formed these stories to sort of illustrate the folly of mankind and how one needs to have like a moral compass and guiding principles that are set in stone, and that you have these rules to live your life in a moral and just way, and that'll make for a better society? Like, what do you think the Bible actually is?
Well, a friend of mine, a rabbi, was a Reform rabbi, was applying to get into an Orthodox yeshiva, an Orthodox college, and he's a Reform rabbi. So the guy says, you have very good credentials and you're very well learned. Do you think the Bible is literally the work of God? The rabbi says, no. So the guy says, well, is it possible? Rabbi says, yes. Guy says, okay, you're in. Right? So there's Dennis Prager, who I'm crazy about, said the other day, he said, I don't believe in the Torah, the Jewish Bible, because of God. He said, I believe in God because of the Torah. So if you read the Torah, the Jewish Bible, and the Christian Bible is just an extension of that, you say, my God, this is incredible wisdom. This goes back to the beginning of time. People who've tried to figure out everything. And
Right.
they didn't have the language that we have, but they had the language that they had. And this was thousands of years of experience progressed and compressed into a myth. So we know that this is true because liberals have always been in love with the myths, especially Jews.
I was trying to look to see if he would answer the question, but I don't think that he really did. But to answer the question, the Bible is not just a bunch of wise people got together and put this thing together. It's been written over, like I said, it's 66 different books. Each one of those written in a different time period for a different purpose for different people. It'd be literally impossible for a bunch of people to come together and write all this stuff down because it was written over thousands of years.
Liberals have always been in love with the myths, especially Jews, with the myths of other cultures, right? We say how beautiful it is that this culture has that myth, that the Haida Indians say the world was formed by a large beaver, and when the beaver slapped his tail like that, it made the oceans, and when the blah, blah, blah. It's a gorgeous myth. Mm-hmm. Nobody says of that myth, wait a second, you can't have a beaver that big, right?
That's what I would say.
Yeah, okay.
I would step in and go, hey, man.
That's funny. That's where the clip ends. But I know where he was going with that. Why is the Bible singled out among the quote-unquote myths of the creation of the universe? And my answer to you would be because the Bible is the truth.